The judgment chamber fell into a silence so profound that Marcus could hear the subtle harmonics of the ship's power systems, the whisper of air recyclers, the distant pulse of what might have been an alien heartbeat. Vexithera stood motionless, processing the full implications of what the human had described with the calculating mind of a strategic planner, who had just realized that all existing tactical doctrines were about to become obsolete. "You have given me much to consider." "Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez," Vexithera said finally, its voice carrying a note of something that might have been respect. "Your species' approach to warfare is unconventional." Marcus nodded acknowledgement. "Unconventional is what we do best, Commander. It's what happens when you're always the underdog in a fight. You learn to make up for what you lack in strength with what you have in determination." The alien commander moved closer, studying Marcus with the intensity of a scientist examining a fascinating but dangerous specimen. "Tell me something, Staff Sergeant. Do you truly believe your species will follow the path you have described? Will humans truly choose centuries of warfare over peaceful integration into the Empire?" The question was clearly more than idle curiosity. Marcus could see that Vexithera was genuinely trying to understand, to assess whether the scenario he'd outlined was realistic, or merely the desperate fantasy of a doomed soldier. The Marine considered his answer carefully, knowing that his words might influence Imperial strategy in the coming conflict. "Commander," Marcus said slowly, "let me tell you about something called the Alamo. 189 men defending a mission in Texas against several thousand Mexican soldiers. They knew they couldn't win. They knew they were all going to die. But they fought anyway, and when they died, they became a rallying cry for the rest of Texas. Remember, the Alamo became more powerful than any victory could have been." He gestured toward the recording device. "That's what you're creating here. Not just my death, but my example. Every human who sees this recording is going to remember Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, the Marine who told an alien empire to go to hell, and they're going to ask themselves what they're willing to do to honor that example." Vexithera's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You believe your death will inspire rather than demoralize your species." "I know it will," Marcus replied with absolute confidence. "Because that's how humans work. We don't mourn our dead, Commander, we avenge them. Every Marine who's died in combat becomes a reason for the next Marine to fight harder. Every civilian killed in war becomes justification for taking the gloves off." The alien commander was silent for long moments, compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lighting as if processing data that didn't fit into any existing framework. When Vexithera spoke again, the words seemed to come from some deep place of uncertainty. "The Empire has ruled for millennia by demonstrating the futility of resistance. Public executions, destruction of rebel strongholds, examples made of those who defy Imperial authority. Such tactics have proven effective across hundreds of species. Because you've been dealing with rational species," Marcus pointed out. "Species that could look at the cost of resistance and decide it wasn't worth paying. But humans aren't entirely rational, especially when we're angry. We're the species that invented the concept of cutting off your nose to spite your face, and then decided it was an acceptable strategy under certain circumstances." Marcus began walking slowly around the chamber one final time, his movement measured and deliberate. "You want to know what's going to happen when Imperial forces attack Earth? I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. You're going to win every major battle. You're going to destroy human fleets, occupy human cities, force human governments to surrender, and then you're going to discover that winning battles isn't the same thing as winning wars." He paused in front of the displays showing Imperial technology, because while you're celebrating your victories, humans are going to be learning. Every engagement teaches us something new about Imperial tactics. Every captured piece of equipment shows us something about Imperial technology. Every dead Zephyrian gives us information about Imperial biology. The Marine's smile returned sharp and predatory, and humans are very good at turning information into weapons. "We're going to figure out what frequencies disrupt your communications. We're going to learn what chemicals are toxic to your physiology. We're going to discover which of your materials become explosive under the right conditions." Vexithera's armor rippled with what was clearly deep agitation. "You speak as if Imperial security measures would be ineffective against human infiltration." "Your security measures are designed to stop rational actors working within existing frameworks," Marcus replied. "But humans excel at thinking outside existing frameworks. We're the species that looked at the problem of powered flight and decided the answer was to strap wings to an engine. We're the people who wanted to go to the moon and figured out that the solution was to sit on top of a controlled explosion. He gestured toward the chamber's advanced systems. All of this technology, all of these safeguards, all of these security measures, they're designed by minds that think logically, that follow predictable patterns, that work within established parameters. But human minds don't work that way. We're the species that invented jazz music, abstract art, and fusion cuisine. We don't just think outside the box, Commander. We use the box as raw material to build something completely different. The recording device adjusted its focus one final time, capturing the image of a human soldier who had faced down in Galactic Empire and refused to blink. Marcus looked directly into its sensors, knowing that his words would eventually reach Earth, would be heard by people who would have to decide how to respond to the coming invasion. "So here's my final message," Marcus said, his voice carrying the absolute conviction of someone who had found his purpose in the face of death. "To every human who sees this recording, to every person who's going to have to live with the consequences of what happens next, remember this: empires rise and empires fall, but the human spirit is eternal." He straightened to attention, every inch the Marine he'd trained to become. "We are not subjects to be ruled. We are not resources to be exploited. We are not problems to be solved. We are human beings and we bow to no one." Marcus turned back to Vexithera, his expression calm and resolved. "I've said what I came to say, Commander. Your move." The alien commander stood silent for several heartbeats, then activated a control on its armor. The chamber's lighting shifted back to normal, and the holographic displays faded away, leaving only the stark reality of alien technology and human defiance. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez," Vexithera said formally, "you have shown courage in the face of certain death. This is a quality the Empire respects even in its enemies. Your death will be swift and without unnecessary pain." "I appreciate that," Marcus replied with genuine sincerity. "And Commander? When your people are trying to figure out where it all went wrong, when the Empire is dealing with human resistance cells on 1,000 worlds, when Zephyrian mothers are afraid to let their children leave home because of what humans might do to them, remember this conversation." He smiled one last time, the expression carrying all the confidence and determination that had made him a United States Marine. "Remember that you had a chance to walk away. Remember that a human soldier tried to warn you what would happen if you didn't. And remember that every drop of blood that gets spilled in this war is on Imperial hands, because you chose conquest over coexistence." Vexithera raised its weapon, the crystalline structure humming with lethal energy. "Any final words, Staff Sergeant?" Marcus thought of his sister Maria, probably getting ready for another shift at the hospital, his nephew Tommy, who would grow up in a world at war because of decisions made by beings he'd never met. His parents, his friends, his fellow Marines, all the people who would have to live with the consequences of this moment. "Semper Fi," Marcus said quietly. The energy beam that ended Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez's life was indeed swift and without unnecessary pain. But his words, captured by Imperial recording devices and transmitted across the galaxy, would echo through human space for generations to come. The Zephyrian Empire had wanted to broadcast an example of human submission. Instead, they had just created the most dangerous thing in the known universe, a human martyr with a message. The war that followed would prove that Marcus Rodriguez had been wrong about one thing and right about everything else. It didn't take centuries for humans to reverse engineer Imperial technology. It took 18 months. And it didn't take generations for the galaxy to understand what happened when you threatened human freedom. It took 3 years for the Zephyrian Empire to request a ceasefire. It took 5 years for them to offer unconditional surrender, and it took exactly 7 years, 3 months, and 14 days from the moment Marcus Rodriguez smiled in the face of Imperial ultimatum for the last Zephyrian fleet to retreat beyond the galactic rim, carrying with them a hard-earned understanding of what it meant to underestimate the human capacity for vindictive creativity. The message had been delivered, and the galaxy had listened. Humans, as it turned out, really didn't know how to surrender properly. The recording device's lens adjusted one final time, capturing the defiant stance of a human who had just declared war against an empire that spanned the galaxy. Vexithera stood motionless, compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lighting as the alien commander processed not just Marcus's words, but their implications for everything the Zephyrian Empire thought it understood about conquest and control. Your message will be delivered, Vexthara said finally, its voice carrying an odd formality. Though I suspect your species will find it less inspiring than you believe. When Imperial fleets darken your skies and your cities burn, when your governments fall and your military forces are scattered, your words will seem like the empty bravado of a dead soldier. Marcus shrugged with the casual confidence that had been driving his captors to distraction. Maybe. Or maybe they'll understand what I've been trying to tell you this whole time. He gestured around the chamber, taking in the advanced technology, the displays of Imperial might, the overwhelming evidence of Zephyrian superiority. All of this is impressive, Commander. Really impressive. But it's not enough. Elaborate. You've built an empire based on being stronger than everyone else, Marcus explained. Bigger ships, better weapons, superior technology. It's worked because every species you've encountered has played by the same rules. They've tried to match your strength with their strength, your technology with their technology. When they couldn't keep up, they surrendered. The Marine began walking slowly around the chamber again. His movements relaxed, despite the weapons trained on him. But humans don't play by those rules. We learned a long time ago that when you can't win by being stronger, you win by being smarter. When you can't match your enemy's advantages, you exploit their weaknesses. When you can't fight fair, you fight dirty. Vexthara's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned to recognize as deep thought. You speak of asymmetric warfare as if it were some great revelation. The Empire has encountered insurgencies before. They can be contained, managed, eventually eliminated through proper application of force. Has the Empire ever encountered an insurgency with access to your own technology? Marcus asked casually. Because that's what's going to happen here. Every Imperial ship that crashes on Earth becomes a source of advanced materials. Every dead Zephyrian soldier becomes a biology lesson for human scientists. Every captured piece of equipment becomes a blueprint for human engineers. The alien commander's armor rippled with what was definitely agitation now. Imperial technology incorporates safeguards against reverse engineering. Critical systems are biometrically locked to prevent unauthorized access. Marcus's laugh was genuinely amused. Commander, humans once figured out how to build atomic bombs using nothing but theoretical physics and industrial equipment from the 1940s. You think biometric locks are going to stop us? We're the species that invented hacking as a form of entertainment. He pointed to the displays showing Imperial fleet formations. But that's not even the best part. You want to know what's really going to make this interesting? Humans are social creatures, Commander. We share information. When one group of humans figures out how to crack Imperial encryption, they don't keep it secret. They teach everyone else how to do it too. The implications of this seem to dawn on Vexthara with visible impact. You suggest that technological advantages would disseminate rapidly through human resistance networks. I'm not suggesting it, Marcus replied. I'm describing how human society works. We've got something called the Internet, Commander, a global communication network that lets any human with access share information with any other human anywhere on the planet, instantaneously. Try to shut it down and we'll build new networks. Try to control it and we'll find ways around your controls. The Marine's expression grew thoughtful. You know what the real irony is here? The Empire's strength is going to become its weakness. You've gotten so good at conquest that you've forgotten how to fight wars. Your soldiers are trained to defeat other soldiers. Your fleets are designed to destroy other fleets. Your tactics are built around facing enemies that fight the way you expect them to fight. He gestured toward the historical footage still playing on the displays. But humans have spent thousands of years fighting each other, and human warfare has always been about adaptation. We don't just develop one set of tactics and stick with them. We constantly evolve, constantly change, constantly find new ways to kill each other more efficiently. Vexthara moved closer, its alien features conveying what might have been professional interest. You believe human military innovation would exceed Imperial capacity for adaptation? I know it will, Marcus replied with absolute confidence. Because innovation is what happens when you're losing and you can't afford to lose. The Empire hasn't been losing for so long that your people have forgotten how to innovate under pressure. But humans, we do our best work when everything's falling apart around us. The recording device continued its silent observation as Marcus outlined, a vision of warfare that was unlike anything the Zephyrian Empire had previously encountered. Not the clash of fleets in space or the organized resistance of conventional military forces, but something more fundamental. A war between philosophies, between ways of thinking about conflict and survival. Here's what you're really facing. Commander? Marcus continued, his voice taking on the measured cadence of a briefing officer. Not just human resistance, but human creativity applied to the problem of hurting Zephyrians. Every human scientist, engineer, programmer, chemist, physicist, and garage mechanic on Earth is about to become focused on one primary goal: finding better ways to kill Imperial soldiers and destroy Imperial equipment. He pointed to the chamber's advanced systems. And we're going to have examples of your technology to work from. We're going to know exactly what your ships are made of, how your weapons function, where your armor is weakest. We're going to study your biology until we understand how your bodies work and what kinds of things can hurt them most efficiently. Vex Ithara's compound eyes fixed on Marcus with laser intensity. You describe systematic development of anti-imperial weapons and tactics. I describe human problem-solving applied to warfare, Marcus corrected. We're very good at it. We turned warfare into a science, Commander. We've got entire academic disciplines devoted to studying how to fight more effectively: military engineering, tactical analysis, strategic planning, operational research. Humans have been professionalizing warfare for centuries. The alien commander was silent for several moments, processing implications that clearly hadn't been factored into Imperial planning. When Vex Ithara spoke again, its voice carried a note of what might have been concern. Your scenario assumes that human resistance would maintain organization and focus sufficient for systematic research and development activities. Marcus's smile was sharp and knowing. Commander, you're thinking about this wrong. You're imagining that human resistance would be some kind of formal military organization that you could target and destroy, but that's not how it's going to work. He gestured broadly, encompassing the entirety of the chamber and by extension the ship that contained it. Human resistance isn't going to be an organization, it's going to be a culture. Every human child is going to grow up learning that their most important duty is to hurt the Empire in whatever way they can. It's going to be built into our education, our entertainment, our religion, our basic social structure. The implications of what he was describing seemed to hit Vex Ithara like a physical blow. The alien commander's armor rippled with patterns that suggested deep disturbance. You described the militarization of an entire species, Vex Ithara said quietly. I describe what happens when you threaten the existence of a species that doesn't know how to give up, Marcus replied. You're not conquering a planet, Commander. You're creating a warrior culture that's going to spend every day for the next 1,000 years learning how to be better at killing you. The Marine straightened to his full height, every inch the professional soldier even in the face of certain death. And Commander? We're really fast learners. The chamber fell silent except for the low hum of the ship's engines and the subtle whisper of environmental systems. Vex Ithara stood motionless for long moments, processing Marcus's words with the calculating mind of a strategic planner, who had just been presented with variables that didn't fit into any existing tactical framework. The other Zephyrians in the chamber shifted restlessly, their compound eyes reflecting the green lighting as they looked between their commander and the defiant human. You speak of rebellion as if it were inevitable, Vex Ithara finally said, its voice carrying a note of something that might have been uncertainty. The Empire has maintained stability for millennia. Our systems of control have proven effective across hundreds of species and thousands of worlds. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, as if considering the alien's point. That's true. You've built an impressive system, Commander. Fear-based compliance backed up by overwhelming military force. It's elegant, efficient, and it's worked perfectly for a very long time. He paused, letting that acknowledgement hang in the air. But it has one critical weakness, which is, it's never been tested by a species that doesn't know how to surrender properly. The Marine began moving again, his pace measured and deliberate. See, your entire system is built on the assumption that rational beings will choose survival over resistance when the cost becomes too high. And for most species, that's probably true. But humans have this psychological quirk that makes us really bad at rational cost-benefit analysis when we're angry. He gestured toward the historical footage still playing on the holographic displays. Look at those images, Commander. Really look at them. Those are humans fighting against impossible odds for causes that any rational observer would consider lost. Japanese soldiers holding out on Pacific Islands for months after their government surrendered. Soviet citizens defending Leningrad while they literally starved to death. Afghan fighters taking on superpowers with nothing but rifles and determination. Vexthera's attention focused on the displays with new intensity. Your species has a history of choosing death over submission. This is not news to Imperial intelligence services. But you don't understand what it means, Marcus replied. You see it as a tactical disadvantage, a weakness to be exploited. But it's actually the opposite. When humans reach that point where death becomes preferable to surrender, we stop being afraid of consequences, and people who aren't afraid of consequences are capable of things that will shock you. The alien commander moved closer, its alien features unreadable but somehow conveying intense interest. Elaborate. Marcus felt a cold smile creep across his face. Kamikaze pilots, Commander. Human beings so committed to their cause that they turned themselves into guided missiles. Suicide bombers who walked into enemy positions with explosives strapped to their bodies. Entire populations that chose to burn their own cities rather than let invaders have them. He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. Now imagine that mindset backed up by modern technology. Imagine humans with access to fusion reactors deciding they'd rather irradiate entire continents than let you have them. Imagine human engineers programming automated factories to produce weapons instead of consumer goods, then rigging those same factories to explode if Imperial forces try to capture them. Vexthera's mandibles clicked rapidly. Self-destructive tactics that would render conquered territories worthless. No rational species would employ such methods. Exactly, Marcus said with satisfaction. No rational species would. But humans aren't entirely rational, especially when we're backed into a corner. We're the species that invented the concept of Pyrrhic victory, and then decided it was an acceptable outcome under certain circumstances. The recording device adjusted its focus, and Marcus realized he was being given a platform to speak directly to Earth, to humanity, to anyone who might eventually see this footage. The thought sobered him, reminded him that this wasn't just about defying his captors. It was about sending a message that might determine how his species prepared for the coming war. But Commander, he continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone, that's not even the worst part. You want to know what's really going to keep Imperial strategists awake at night? It's not the fact that humans will fight to the death. It's the fact that we'll fight to make sure you wish we hadn't. The alien tilted its head in that curious gesture. Explain this distinction. Marcus thought carefully about how to explain a concept that was fundamentally human to a species that had never experienced it. Other species fight defensive wars, Commander. They fight to protect what they have, to preserve their way of life, to minimize losses. When they realize they can't win, they negotiate the best terms they can get and try to salvage what's possible. He moved to stand directly in front of the alien commander, close enough that he could see his own reflection in Vexthera's compound eyes. Humans fight offensive wars even when we're losing. We don't just want to survive. We want to make sure our enemies regret starting the fight in the first place. We want them to understand that attacking humanity was the worst decision they ever made. The Marine's voice dropped to a conversational whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. So when Imperial forces land on Earth, when they start killing human civilians, when they begin the process of enslaving my species, they're not just conquering a planet. They're creating 3 billion humans whose primary goal in life becomes making Zephyrians suffer. Vexthera's armor rippled, the liquid metal flowing in patterns that suggested deep agitation. You speak of impossible scenarios. No species could maintain such motivation across an entire population for extended periods. Want to bet? Marcus asked cheerfully. Because I've got some bad news for you, Commander. Humans have been perfecting the art of intergenerational hatred for thousands of years. We've got families that have been feuding with other families for centuries. We've got ethnic groups that still hate each other over conflicts that happened before their great-grandparents were born. He began counting off on his fingers again. Irish and English. Jews and everyone who ever persecuted them. Balkans ethnic groups with grudges dating back to medieval times. Native American tribes that still remember every broken treaty and broken promise. Humans don't just hold grudges, Commander. We pass them down to our children like family heirlooms. The implications of what he was saying seemed to dawn on Vexthera with the slow inevitability of a sunrise. You suggest that human resistance would continue across multiple generations. I'm not suggesting it, Marcus replied. I'm guaranteeing it. Every human child born under Imperial occupation will grow up hearing stories about the time before the aliens came. About freedom, about independence, about what it means to be human instead of property. And every one of those children will know exactly who took that away from them. He gestured toward the displays showing Imperial technology and conquered worlds. Your empire is based on the idea that resistance will eventually exhaust itself, that subject species will gradually accept Imperial rule and integrate peacefully. But that model assumes that the conquered populations will eventually see benefits to Imperial citizenship that outweigh the costs of continued resistance. Marcus's smile returned, sharp and predatory. But humans aren't going to see benefits, Commander. We're going to see every Imperial innovation, every piece of technology, every administrative efficiency as something that was stolen from us. We're going to spend every day of occupation studying Imperial methods, learning Imperial weaknesses, planning for the day when we can turn your own tools against you. The alien commander stood silent for several long moments, processing the implications of human psychology as described by someone who understood it from the inside. When Vexithara finally spoke, its voice carried a note of what might have been respect. You paint a picture of perpetual warfare, endless conflict that serves no productive purpose. From your perspective, maybe, Marcus acknowledged. But from the human perspective, it serves the most important purpose of all. It means that every Imperial soldier who dies on Earth dies knowing that his death accomplished nothing. It means that every Zephyrian, family that loses a member to human resistance, understands that the Empire's decision to attack humanity was a mistake that keeps on costing them. The Marines straightened to attention, every inch the professional soldier even in defeat. It means that 100 years from now, when some young Zephyrian officer suggests conquering another species, some older, wiser commander is going to shake his head and say, "Remember what happened with the humans. Remember how much that cost us. Maybe we should try diplomacy instead." Marcus looked directly into the recording device's sensors one final time. "That's the message I want you to send to Earth, Commander. Not surrender, but warning. Tell them that Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez died as he lived, as a United States Marine who never learned how to quit. And tell them that when the shooting starts, the whole galaxy is going to learn what that means." The word hung in the air like a physical presence, and Marcus could see its impact on the assembled Zephyrians. They were a species that understood concepts like honor and duty, strategy and tactics, even cruelty when it served a purpose. But vindictiveness, the pure burning desire to make an enemy suffer not for strategic gain but simply because they deserved to suffer, that was something alien to their logical, hierarchical mindset. "Vindictive," Vexthara repeated, testing the concept like a scientist examining a dangerous new compound. "You speak of revenge as if it were a military asset." "Because it is," Marcus replied simply. "Look, Commander, I'm not going to stand here and pretend humans are the most advanced species in the galaxy. We're not the strongest, we're not the smartest, we're definitely not the most technologically sophisticated. But we are absolutely, hands down, the best in the known universe at holding grudges." He gestured toward the holographic displays still showing the ruins of conquered civilizations. "All these species you've defeated, they fought for rational reasons. Survival, protection, preservation of their way of life. When those rational goals became impossible to achieve, they surrendered. They made the logical choice to preserve what they could, rather than lose everything." Marcus began walking slowly around the chamber's perimeter, his boots clicking against the deck with military precision. The Zephyrian guards turned to follow his movement, but their weapons remained lowered. Something about his demeanor had shifted the dynamic in the room from interrogation to education. "Humans don't work that way," Marcus continued. "We've got this quirk in our psychology that makes us really bad at letting things go. Someone burns down our house, we don't just want a new house. We want the guy who burned it down to lose his house too, and his neighbor's house, and maybe his entire neighborhood just to make sure he understands that he made a mistake." Vexithara's compound eyes tracked Marcus's movement with predatory focus. "You describe a species driven by emotion rather than logic. Such behavior is self-destructive." "Sometimes," Marcus admitted. "We've got a whole planet full of examples of humans doing catastrophically stupid things because we couldn't let go of old grievances. But here's the thing about self-destructive behavior, Commander. It's only a problem if you're trying to preserve yourself. If you're planning to go down anyway, taking your enemies with you stops being self-destructive and starts being tactical. The Marine paused in front of one of the displays, showing an Imperial battle fleet in formation. The ships were beautiful in their own way, organic curves and flowing lines that suggested they'd evolved rather than been designed. They looked like predators from some alien ocean, sleek and deadly and supremely confident in their dominance. "Let me paint you a picture of what the next few years are going to look like," Marcus said conversationally. "You're going to attack Earth and you're going to win. Your technology is too advanced, your fleet's too powerful. Human governments will fall. Human military forces will be scattered or destroyed. You'll establish occupation zones, set up administrative districts, start the process of integrating humanity into your empire." He turned away from the display to face Vexithara directly. "And then the real war will begin." The alien commander's head tilted in that curious gesture. "You speak as if defeat and victory are the same thing." "For humans, they kind of are," Marcus replied. "See, you're thinking about this like a conventional conquest. Defeat the military, occupy the territory, establish control, move on to the next target. But humans have this annoying habit of not staying defeated." Marcus began counting off points on his fingers. "First, you're going to discover that destroying human governments doesn't actually stop humans from organizing. We've got thousands of years of experience with underground movements, resistance cells, shadow networks that can operate without central authority. You'll cut off the head of one organization and find that 3 more have sprouted up to take its place." A second finger. "Then you're going to learn about human manufacturing capability. We've turned entire continents into industrial complexes. Every human settlement has the potential to become a weapons factory, and humans have gotten really good at making very effective weapons out of very common materials. Your soldiers are going to start dying from devices that were built in suburban garages by high school chemistry students." A third finger. "After that, you'll discover that humans don't actually need fancy technology to hurt you. We've been developing asymmetric warfare tactics for centuries. We know how to make life miserable for occupying forces using nothing but determination and basic materials. Your supply convoys will start disappearing. Your communication networks will be sabotaged. Your off-duty personnel will begin having unfortunate accidents." Vexithara's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound Marcus was learning to associate with deep thought. "You describe harassment, not warfare. Irritation, not genuine threat." "Right up until it isn't," Marcus replied cheerfully. "See, that's the thing about humans and persistence. We don't know when to quit. Other species fight until the cost becomes too high. Then they negotiate. Humans fight until we win or until there's nobody left to fight. And sometimes we keep fighting even then." He moved to another display, this one showing technical schematics of Imperial technology. "But here's where it gets really interesting, Commander. Humans are also really good at learning from our enemies. Every piece of Imperial equipment we capture, every dead Zephyrian soldier we can examine, every crashed ship we can salvage, it all becomes data. And humans are very good at reverse engineering things." The Marine's smile took on a distinctly predatory quality. "We've spent our entire history stealing technology from each other and improving on it. Chinese invented gunpowder. Europeans turned it into cannons. Germans developed rockets. Americans used them to reach the moon. Humans don't just copy technology, Commander. We take it apart, figure out how it works, then find ways to make it better, cheaper, and more deadly." Vexthara moved closer, its armor rippling with what might have been agitation. "Your species would require centuries to understand Imperial technology sufficiently to pose a genuine threat. The gap in knowledge is too vast." "Maybe," Marcus conceded, "but you're forgetting something important. Humans won't be working alone." The alien commander froze. "Explain." Marcus's grin widened. "Commander, you just announced to the galaxy that you're planning to commit genocide against an entire species. You think the other alien races are going to watch that happen and assume they're safe? You think they're going to stand by while you demonstrate that Imperial mercy only lasts as long as Imperial convenience?" He gestured toward the displays showing the ruins of conquered civilizations. "Every species you've defeated, every planet you've occupied, every government you've installed, they're all going to be watching to see what happens when someone finally tells the Empire no and means it. And when they see humans fighting back, when they see us actually hurting you, some of them are going to start getting ideas." Vexthara's entire body went rigid. "The Empire maintains perfect order throughout its domain. Our subject species are loyal and productive citizens. Your subject species are slaves who haven't had an opportunity to rebel," Marcus corrected. "But rebellions are contagious, Commander. When one group of slaves stands up and fights back, it gives other slaves ideas. And humans are about to become the most inspiring slaves in galactic history. The recording device continued its silent observation, capturing every word of what was becoming less an interrogation and more a lecture on asymmetric warfare theory. Marcus wondered if human intelligence services would be able to extract useful information from whatever footage eventually made its way back to Earth. So here's what's really going to happen, Marcus continued, settling into the rhythm of a briefing officer explaining a complex operation. You're going to conquer Earth, and it's going to cost you more than you expect. Then you're going to try to hold Earth, and it's going to cost you more than you can afford. Then other species are going to start getting restless, and you're going to discover that an empire built on fear only works as long as nobody stops being afraid. He pointed at Vexithara with the confidence of a professor making a key point to a particularly slow student. And Commander, humans are about to teach the entire galaxy how to stop being afraid of you. The silence that followed Marcus's words stretched like a taut wire through the judgment chamber. Vexithara stood motionless, processing the human's response with the calculating mind of a predator that had just realized its prey might have fangs of its own. The other Zephyrians shifted uneasily, their compound eyes reflecting the chamber's green lighting like scattered emeralds. Creative, Vexithara repeated slowly, tasting the word as if it were something foreign and potentially poisonous. An interesting choice of terminology. The Empire has encountered creative species before, Staff Sergeant. The hegemony of Arcturus thought themselves quite innovative. They developed quantum torpedoes that could phase through conventional shields. The Crystalline Confederacy created living ships that could regenerate from catastrophic damage. The Void Dancers learned to manipulate dark matter itself as a weapon. The alien commander gestured, and new holographic displays materialized around them, showing the remnants of dead civilizations, shattered worlds, empty space where star systems once thrived, the archaeological footprints of species that had challenged imperial authority and lost. All of them were creative, Staff Sergeant. All of them believed their innovations would save them from imperial justice. Where are they now? Vexthara's voice carried a note of cold satisfaction. Their worlds are mining colonies. Their survivors serve imperial interests. Their technologies have been incorporated into our arsenal. Creativity without wisdom is merely an elaborate form of suicide. Marcus studied the holographic displays with the same clinical attention he'd give to enemy positions during a mission briefing. Each image told a story of conquest and assimilation, of resistance crushed under the weight of overwhelming force. But instead of intimidating him, the displays only confirmed what he'd already suspected about his captors. You know what I see when I look at these pictures? Marcus asked, pointing to the image of a world that looked like it had been cracked open like an egg, its molten core still glowing in the vacuum of space. I see an empire that's gotten fat and lazy on easy victories. You've been beating up on species that never had to fight for their survival. But humans, we've been at war with something or someone for our entire recorded history. He moved to another display, this one showing the skeletal remains of what had once been a massive space station. You want to know what makes humans different from all these other species you've conquered? We don't just fight to win, Commander. We fight to make sure our enemies regret starting the fight in the first place. Vexithara's mandibles clicked in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as skepticism, bold words from a member of a species that has barely achieved interstellar travel. Your most advanced warships would be outclassed by our patrol boats. Your most powerful weapons are crude chemical explosives and primitive nuclear devices. What could you possibly do against Imperial technology that these other species could not? Marcus thought about that question for a moment, really considered it. The alien commander wasn't wrong about the technology gap. Humanity's military was centuries behind the Zephyrian Empire in terms of raw capability. But there were other kinds of advantages, other ways to measure strength that didn't show up on technical specifications. Tell me something, Commander, Marcus said, settling into the kind of relaxed posture that had always made his drill instructors nervous. How long has it been since the Empire fought an actual war? Not a conquest, not a pacification campaign against some peaceful mining colony. I'm talking about a real war, against an enemy that hit back hard enough to make you bleed. The question seemed to catch Vexithara off guard. The alien commander's head tilted in that curious gesture Marcus had noticed before, compound eyes focusing on him with new intensity. The Empire maintains perfect order throughout its domain, Vexithara replied carefully. Effective governance eliminates the need for prolonged conflicts. That's not what I asked, Marcus pressed. When was the last time Imperial soldiers died in significant numbers? When did you last lose ships, planets, entire fleets to enemy action? When did your people last have to ration food or salvage parts or improvise weapons because your supply lines were cut and your factories were burning? The alien's silence was answer enough. Marcus nodded, filing that information away for future use. See, that's the difference between you and us, Marcus continued. Humans have been fighting total war for thousands of years. We've learned how to turn entire populations into weapons factories. We've mastered the art of making the enemy pay for every inch of ground. Every day of occupation, every moment of thinking they've won. He began pacing, unconsciously falling into the rhythm of a lecturer addressing a class of junior Marines. You want to know what creative means in human terms? It means turning commercial aircraft into guided missiles. It means building bombs out of fertilizer and diesel fuel. It means a grandmother in occupied territory teaching her 10-year-old grandson how to make improvised explosive devices out of household chemicals. Vexathara's armor plates shifted, the liquid metal rippling with what might have been unease. You speak of involving civilians in warfare. The Empire considers such tactics barbaric. The Empire considers them effective, Marcus corrected. That's why you're trying to break human morale before the shooting starts. You know that once a war begins, humans don't distinguish between soldiers and civilians the way other species do. Everyone becomes a combatant. Every factory becomes a target. Every resource becomes a weapon. The recording device continued its silent observation, capturing every word for transmission to Earth. Marcus wondered how his words would be received, whether human governments would understand the message he was trying to send. Not surrender, but preparation. Not despair, but determination. You're describing anarchy, Vexthera observed. The breakdown of civilized order into chaos and destruction? Surely your leaders would not condone such tactics. Marcus's laugh was short and sharp. Commander, you just threatened to commit genocide against my entire species unless I knelt and called you master. You think human leaders are going to worry about playing by the rules after that? You've just declared a war of extinction. That changes everything. He stopped pacing and faced the alien commander directly. You want to know what happens when humans fight a war of extinction? Look up something called the Second World War. 60 million dead in 6 years, Commander. Entire cities turned to ash. Populations displaced across continents. And that was when we were fighting each other with primitive technology. The holographic displays flickered and changed, now showing archived human military footage that the Zephyrians had somehow obtained. Normandy Beach on D-Day, the raising of the flag at Iwo Jima, Marines fighting house to house in the ruins of Seoul. Images of human warriors doing the impossible because failure meant the end of everything they held dear. What you're looking at, Marcus said quietly, is what happens when humans decide something is worth dying for. And Commander, I've got some bad news for you. Freedom is definitely worth dying for. So is protecting our families. So is making sure our children don't grow up as slaves in your empire. Vexathara studied the historical footage with what appeared to be genuine interest. Your species' capacity for violence is indeed remarkable. But violence without direction is merely destruction. The Empire has learned to channel aggression into productive purposes. Resistance movements can be broken, Staff Sergeant. Rebellions can be crushed. Even the most determined insurgency will eventually exhaust itself against superior numbers and technology. Maybe, Marcus acknowledged, but here's what you're missing. Those other species you conquered, they were fighting to preserve what they had. Humans will be fighting to get revenge for what you took from us. There's a difference. He pointed to one of the displays showing the ruined remains of a beautiful crystal city. When you conquered these people, they were fighting defensively. They wanted to protect their homes, their culture, their way of life. Noble goals, but ultimately limiting. They could be bargained with, reasoned with, eventually convinced to surrender to preserve what remained. Marcus's smile returned, harder and colder than before. But when you attack Earth, when you start killing humans, you're not just conquering us. You're creating an entire species of people who have nothing left to lose and every reason to hate you. You're turning 3 billion humans into something the galaxy has never seen before. And what is that? Vexathara asked, though the alien's tone suggested it wasn't sure it wanted to hear the answer. Vindictive. The smile that spread across Marcus's face was the same one he'd worn the day he'd earned his eagle, globe. An anchor at graduation from Marine Corps Recruit Depot. It was the smile of someone who'd just been presented with exactly the kind of challenge he'd trained his entire adult life to face. Vexithara's compound eyes narrowed as the alien commander tried to process this unexpected response. "You find your situation amusing, human?" Vexithara's voice carried a dangerous edge that suggested many beings had regretted provoking that tone in the past. "Not amusing," Marcus replied, his smile never wavering. "Just familiar. See, Commander? You've made the same mistake that a lot of people make when they first meet Marines. You think we're just soldiers with better marketing, but you're missing something important." He took a step forward, ignoring the way the Zephyrian guards tensed and raised their weapons. "We're not just warriors, Commander. We're Marines, and Marines don't kneel." Vexithara's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound that Marcus was beginning to recognize as agitation. "Your bravado is meaningless in the face of Imperial might. You are one being against an empire that spans 1,000 worlds. Your defiance accomplishes nothing except to ensure your death will be more painful than necessary." "Maybe," Marcus acknowledged with a shrug. "But here's the thing about Marines. We've got this funny habit of doing the impossible when people tell us we can't. Iwo Jima, Chosin Reservoir, Fallujah, the siege of New Geneva Station. Every time someone's told us we can't win, we found a way to prove them wrong." The alien commander gestured to one of the guards, who stepped forward and struck Marcus across the face with the butt of its energy weapon. The blow was powerful enough to stagger him, and he tasted blood where his teeth cut the inside of his cheek. But he straightened immediately, that same infuriating smile still plastered across his face. "That all you got?" he asked, spitting blood onto the pristine deck plating. "Because my drill instructor hit harder than that, and he was a 90-pound woman with anger management issues." Vexithara raised a clawed hand to stop the guard from striking again. "Your resistance to pain is noted, Staff Sergeant, but irrelevant. Physical torture is such a crude instrument. The Empire has developed far more sophisticated methods of persuasion." The alien commander activated a control surface on its armor, and the chamber's lighting shifted to a sickly green hue. Holographic displays materialized in the air around Marcus, showing images that made his blood run cold. Earth as seen from orbit. Major cities clearly visible in the crystal-clear resolution of Imperial surveillance technology. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Washington, D.C., all rendered in perfect detail. "We have been watching your species for some time," Vexithara explained conversationally. "Your governments believe they are hidden by the vastness of space, protected by distance and primitive defensive systems. They are wrong. At this moment, 47 Imperial battle fleets are positioned at strategic points throughout your solar system. Your entire species exists at our sufferance." Marcus felt his jaw clench as the images shifted to show what were unmistakably alien warships lurking in the outer system, their profiles sleek and predatory against the starfield. The technology gap was obvious. Where human ships were bulky and utilitarian, the Imperial vessels looked like they'd been grown rather than built, their organic curves suggesting a level of biotechnology that humanity was centuries away from achieving. "Your move, Staff Sergeant," Vexithara continued. "Kneel and your species lives. Continue this pointless defiance and we begin with your largest population centers. We estimate that approximately 50 million humans will die in the first wave of pacification strikes. Their deaths will be on your conscience." The recording device whirred softly as it adjusted its focus, waiting to capture Marcus's submission for broadcast across human space. The Zephyrian soldiers stood at attention, professional soldiers carrying out an unpleasant but necessary duty in their minds. Everything about the situation was designed to break his will, to make him feel the crushing weight of responsibility for billions of lives. Marcus looked at the images of Earth, at the Imperial fleets that could turn his homeworld into a cinder with minimal effort. He thought about his sister Maria, probably just getting ready for work at the hospital in San Diego, his nephew Tommy, who'd be in 3rd grade by now and still sent him crayon drawings of spaceships. His parents, retired and living quietly in Phoenix, who still kept his room exactly the way he'd left it when he'd shipped out. Then he thought about Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Walsh, the 90-pound woman with anger management issues who'd transformed him from a scared kid from East LA into a United States Marine. He remembered her voice cutting through the chaos of the rifle range. "Pain is weakness leaving the body, recruit. Fear is just your brain trying to keep you safe. But Marines don't get to be safe, Marines get to be dangerous." Marcus squared his shoulders and looked directly into the recording device's sensors. When he spoke, his voice carried the absolute confidence of someone who'd spent years learning how to function under impossible pressure. "Commander Vexithara," he said formally, "with all due respect, you can take your offer and shove it where your species keeps its reproductive organs. I am Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps, and I serve at the pleasure of the American people and the Constitution of the United States of America. My oath doesn't have an expiration date, and it sure as hell doesn't have an escape clause for alien invasion." Vexthara's entire body went rigid, the liquid metal of its armor seeming to freeze in place. "You would condemn your entire species to death for the sake of your primitive pride?" "I'm not condemning anyone," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm just refusing to make deals with terrorists. See, Commander, you made one critical error in your calculations. You assumed that because you have bigger guns and more ships, humans would just roll over and accept slavery, but you don't understand what you're dealing with." He gestured toward the holographic displays showing Earth and the Imperial fleets. "You think this is the end of the story? Big scary aliens show up and demand submission. But this is just the opening chapter. Because now you've given humanity something we've never had before." "And what is that?" Vexithara asked, its voice deadly quiet. Marcus's smile widened into something that would have made a shark proud. "A common enemy. See, humans spend most of our time fighting each other over religion, politics, resources, who makes the best barbecue sauce. But every now and then, something comes along that unites us, something that reminds us that, underneath all our differences, we're still the same species that crawled out of caves and decided the stars weren't far enough away." The Marine took another step forward, and this time the guards didn't raise their weapons. Something in his demeanor, some fundamental shift in the atmosphere of the chamber, made them hesitate. "You want to know what happens next, Commander? I'll tell you. You're going to kill me, because that's what bullies do when someone stands up to them. Then you're going to attack Earth, probably thinking you'll win some quick victories and break human morale. And for a while, you'll probably be right. You'll take some cities, occupy some territory, maybe even force some governments to surrender." Marcus paused, his eyes never leaving Vexthara's alien face. "But then you're going to discover something that every tyrant in human history has learned the hard way. Humans are really, really good at being unreasonable. We're the species that invented total war, Commander. We're the people who looked at weapons of mass destruction and thought, hey, let's make bigger ones. And when you back us into a corner, when you threaten our families and our freedom, we don't get scared." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a conversational whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout could have managed. "We get creative." Staff Sergeant Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez had seen worse days than this one, though admittedly not many involved being dragged through the corridors of an alien warship by creatures that looked like 7-foot-tall praying mantises wearing ceremonial armor. The Zephyrian Empire's flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was impressive in its own way. All gleaming metal surfaces and pulsing energy conduits that hummed with barely contained power. But Marcus had been in enough hostile territory to know that impressive didn't mean invincible. 3 days ago, he'd been part of a routine patrol aboard the human research vessel New Horizons when the Zephyrians had appeared out of nowhere. Their ships materialized from hyperspace like metallic ghosts, surrounding the small human craft with overwhelming firepower. The boarding action that followed was swift and brutal. Most of the crew had been stunned into unconsciousness by some kind of neural disruptor. But Marcus had been wearing his combat gear during what should have been a milk run through friendly space. The Zephyrians were methodical in their capture techniques. They'd studied human physiology enough to know that their standard neural weapons worked on most humans, but they hadn't counted on the military-grade neural dampeners built into marine combat armor. Marcus had played unconscious long enough to assess the situation, then made his move when they'd started separating the crew. 3 dead Zephyrians and a running firefight through the ship's corridors later. He'd been overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Now he found himself being marched toward what his captors called the Judgment Chamber, where apparently the ship's commander would decide his fate. The 2 Zephyrian guards flanking him chittered to each other in their insectoid language, occasionally prodding him with weapons that looked like crystalline spears but hummed with energy that made his teeth ache. The chamber doors slid open with a whispered hiss, revealing a vast circular room dominated by a raised platform in the center. Holographic displays showed star charts and tactical information floating in the air like glowing constellation maps. But what caught Marcus's attention immediately was the figure standing on the central platform. A Zephyrian unlike the others, taller and more imposing, with armor that seemed to be made of living metal that shifted and flowed like liquid silver. "Approach," the figure commanded in perfect English, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested it was being translated by some kind of universal communication device. "You stand before Fleet Commander Vexithera of the Eternal Dominion, voice of the Zephyrian Empire and bringer of order to the chaotic realms." Marcus walked forward with the same steady pace he'd use approaching a superior officer, his boots clicking against the polished deck plating. He'd learned long ago that showing fear to bullies, whether they were human drill instructors or 7-foot alien overlords, only made things worse. The Marine in him automatically cataloged exits, weapon positions, and potential cover while maintaining the appearance of casual compliance. "I am told you are called Marcus Rodriguez," Vexithera continued, moving down from the platform with fluid grace that was somehow both elegant and predatory. "Your species designation is Marine, which our intelligence suggests indicates some form of warrior caste among your people." "Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps," Marcus replied, his voice steady and professional. "Serial number 284766914429. A sound that might have been laughter emerged from Vexithera's vocal apparatus.
"Name, rank, and identification number."
How quaint. Your species clings to such primitive concepts even when facing extinction. The alien commander circled him slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. "Do you know why you are here, Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez?" "Because your people attacked a civilian research vessel in neutral space," Marcus answered without hesitation. "And because I defended my shipmates when you boarded us." "Neutral space," Vexithera repeated, the words carrying a tone of amusement. "There is no neutral space in this galaxy, human. There is only imperial space and space that has not yet been properly civilized. Your vessel was trespassing in territory claimed by the Zephyrian Empire for the past 3,000 years. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Funny, our star charts don't show any imperial claims in that sector. Maybe you folks need to update your filing system with the Galactic Council." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Vexithera's compound eyes fixed on him with laser intensity. "The Galactic Council exists at the sufferance of the Empire. Their authority extends only as far as we permit it to extend." The alien commander moved closer, close enough that Marcus could smell something like ozone and copper emanating from its exoskeleton. "But we are not here to discuss politics or territorial claims, Staff Sergeant. We are here to discuss your future." "My future is looking pretty simple from where I stand," Marcus replied calmly. "Either you're going to kill me, or you're going to try to use me as leverage against my government. Either way, I've got a job to do until someone tells me otherwise." Vexithera's head tilted in what might have been curiosity. "Your composure is unexpected. Most species show more deference when facing the might of the Empire. Fear, at the very least. Yet you stand here as if you were merely inconvenienced by our presence." Marcus shrugged, a gesture that seemed to fascinate the alien guards. "I've been inconvenienced by experts, Commander. This isn't even close to the worst Tuesday I've had this month." "Perhaps you do not understand your situation," Vexithera said, moving back to the central platform. "Your ship has been destroyed. Your crew is in our detention cells. Your government believes you are dead, lost in a tragic accident during routine exploration. No one is coming to rescue you, Staff Sergeant. No one even knows where you are." The words were clearly meant to break down his psychological defenses, to make him feel isolated and helpless. Marcus had endured similar tactics during survival training. Though admittedly the instructors had been human and significantly less intimidating than a 7-foot-tall alien warlord, he kept his expression neutral, giving away nothing. "So what do you want from me?" he asked simply. Vexithera's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among the Zephyrians. "We want you to serve as an example, Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez. You see, the Empire has decided that humanity has reached a level of technological advancement that makes them potentially dangerous if left unchecked. Your species' tendency toward violence and your rapid expansion into space concerns the Imperial High Command." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. "You're talking about conquest." "We prefer the term pacification," Vexithera corrected. "And you, Staff Sergeant, are going to help us demonstrate to your species the futility of resistance. When we broadcast your submission to your homeworld, When the galaxy sees a human warrior kneel before Imperial authority, it will save countless lives by discouraging pointless defiance. The alien commander gestured, and a recording device descended from the ceiling on a mechanical arm, its sensors focusing on Marcus like the eyes of some technological predator. Additional Zephyrian soldiers filed into the chamber, their weapons trained on him with professional efficiency. "You have a choice," Vexithara announced, its voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Kneel before the might of the Zephyrian Empire and pledge your loyalty to Imperial rule, and you will live to see your species integrated peacefully into our domain. Refuse and you will die here slowly and publicly, as an example of what happens to those who defy the natural order." Marcus looked around the chamber, taking in the weapons, the recording equipment, the expectant faces of his captors. He thought about the crew of the New Horizons, good people who'd been doing nothing more threatening than studying asteroid compositions when they'd been attacked. He thought about Earth, about the Marines still training at Paris Island who had no idea that hostile aliens were planning their subjugation. Then, Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez did something that Vexithara clearly hadn't expected. He smiled.